So, to understand Krishna as a person is very, very difficult. One needs to actually have a loving relationship with Krishna in order to understand Krishna as a person, because most people think he's impersonal. So Prabhupada explains how even though the impersonalists, they worship the deities and they chant the holy name, but there is no love involved in it. Ultimately, they're doing that to gain something else. They're chanting, they're worshiping, they're doing all this to lose their individuality and to merge into Brahman. So there's no question of performing these activities, for them other than to get something from it. But bhakti is so different. Why? Because the performance is the goal. We are doing this for the pleasure of Krishna. There's no, for bhaktas, for pure bhaktas, there's no other motivation. And this the impersonalists cannot understand. That's why we know that Prabhupada translated bhakti as devotional service, not as worship. Actually, technically, bhakti means worship, but he translated it as devotional service. In other words, unless we perform loving devotional service to Krishna, we really cannot understand that Krishna is a person. Just like a child, when he serves the Lord, when he's trained to serve the Lord in small ways, then he can understand that Krishna is a person. Sitting on the altar, he's a person. Oh, Krishna is hungry today, so let me give him food. We have to serve him food. Oh, today is very hot. Krishna is feeling hot, so we turn the fan on. Right? So by serving Krishna, the child understands that Krishna is actually a person, just like the child will literally take the doll as a person, right? We've seen a child play with a doll. She's gonna, feed the doll, put the doll to rest, like that. So in the same way, by serving Krishna, we can understand that Krishna is a person, and we need to love him. We need to feed him, and a love develops. Actually, love develops when we serve each other, right? Just like in the Vedic culture, we have arranged marriages, and it's a very good system. Why? Because even though the husband and wife don't know each other initially, but as they serve each other, love develops. And this kind of love is very secure, because it's based on the platform of service. So this is through this invocation, Shukadeva Goswami is making that point, that he is praying, he's offering obeisances to Vasudev, the son of Vasudeva. So in our next slide, we're going to hear Shukadeva Goswami glorifying question by Parikshit Maharaj. Now, remember the question that Parikshit Maharaj asked in the last chapter? A question that is pretty much the answer is in the entire Bhagavatam, especially it is in the first two chapters of Canto 2 and a little bit in chapter 3. So the question was, what is the duty of anyone in all circumstances? And specifically the duty of someone who's about to die. So and Shukadeva Goswami is glorifying that question. And why is he glorifying the question? Because it evokes Krishna Katha. Anything that evokes glorification of the pastimes of the Lord is very, very glorious, because it benefits everyone. So in the first verse, Shukadeva Goswami is saying, "My dear king, your question is glorious because it is very beneficial to all kinds of people. The answer to this question is a prime subject matter for hearing, and it is approved by all transcendentalists." So here Shukadeva Goswami is appearing for the first time, and he's going to speak. He's saying that Parikshit Maharaj, your question is very, very glorious. Very, very glorious, because it is beneficial for all people. It's not only beneficial for transcendentalists, but it's also beneficial for materialists and even for animals. Why? Because of the sound vibration. because of the sound vibration. The sound vibration of Krishna's holy name and his pastimes is so pure that it makes everything auspicious. So in one of his lectures, Prabhupada says that the reason why Parikshit Maharaj's question is glorious, because the reply is in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And the Srimad Bhagavatam is so glorious. It's got 18,000 verses. And Prabhupada says in that lecture, he says that every verse is so important that if one studies even one verse, it will take him 1 month to understand. And then he calculates and he says that, which takes, so you can calculate, and it takes 18,000 months, which is like 1,500 years to actually understand Srimad Bhagavatam. It's such an important book. So Parikshit Maharaj is asking, what should we hear? Should we hear about Krishna? Is that what we should hear? So then in this same verse, Shukadev Goswami raises a question that if people don't hear about Krishna, then what do they actually hear? What do they hear? If people don't hear about Krishna, so it's good to know what do they actually hear. So hearing is like a funnel to the mind, and in this way, when we hear, when the sound vibration goes in, we actually become absorbed in that sound vibration. So that when it's materialistic sound, then we become absorbed in things of material world. So in text, in verses 2 to 4, it describes what one should not do. So that we will cover in our next slide. And in the 5th verse, it will describe the necessity of hearing about Krishna. So in our next slide, we talk about what is the alternative to hearing about Krishna? What do such people do? And this is what Shukadev Goswami is going to explain. What do such people do? Those persons who are materially engrossed, being blind to the knowledge of ultimate truth, have many subject matters for hearing in human society, O Emperor. The lifetime of such an envious householder is passed at night, either in sleeping or in sex indulgence, and in the daytime, either in making money or maintaining family members. They become attached, Prabhupada is saying, to the body, the children and wife and husband. So Prabhupada, in these verses, he's explaining that those who are blind to spiritual knowledge, they have many subject matters for hearing. They have so many. And in order to explain this point, he's dividing householders into 2 types of householders. One is the Grahamedis and the other one is the Grahastas. Now the word Graha is house and Asta means ashram. So it means that anybody who's the Grahasta ashram, it means that he's taking spiritual life very seriously. Very simple. And the opposite is Grahamedi, which means these are the envious householders whose essence of life is sense gratification. Why is he called envious? Think about it. Why is he called envious? It's because such a householder he's always thinking what the other person has that he doesn't have. That's why he's called envious. He's thinking about his own sense gratification. He's thinking, oh, I don't have this. Look at that person. He has it. And he spends his time decorating his apartment, his children and wife, and he has no other business. He's involved simply in eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. And he's very, very attached to them, to his family members. And in this way, he makes friends and enemies. So, and Prabhupada explains how this mentality has been existing for a very, very long time. And how it's still existing. And even at that time, they were just wasting their time, always thinking about money, 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 and where is money? And even today, this is happening. So Prabhupada also goes on to explain how time is swallowing all of us. And unless we hear Krishna Katha and develop our consciousness and develop our devotion, then at the time of death, we will be thinking about this body and how important it is to focus our mind on Krishna consciousness. And that's why Prabhupada stressed book distribution, because people actually they are actually innocent. So many people, they absolutely don't know that how they are spending their time. and how detrimental it is, because ultimately they have to face death and many, many bodies of suffering. So that's why Prabhupada stressed book distribution, because he knew that if these books are given out, then if a person even reads one line of it, he will be benefited, and he will start thinking about Atma Tattva, about his real self, about the real purpose of life. So how powerful these books are, and how powerful it's going to affect even those people on the street who know nothing about it. Prabhupada writes that this material world is called a world of death. Why? Because from the day we are born till the day we die, it just simply means we are getting closer to our end. And we don't think about it, do we? That we, as parents, we take care of our children and we give them shelter. And one day they will be giving shelter to their children. And in this way, life will go on. But that's not the purpose of life, the absorption in family life. Because Prabhupada writes, this is a game where no one will survive. No one will survive in the struggle of material existence. So what should we do about it? Is it enough to hold the hand of our dear one? Or to feed a pet dog or cat? Is that what is the way to get out of this struggle? No, Prabhupada is saying we should wake up and remember that actually we are eternal beings, and we need to strive for that eternal state. So you can imagine what it's going to do to a person who gets this book. What a shock he's going to go through, right? What a shock when he reads these things. So I'll read a little bit of Prabhupada's purport. It's very, very powerful, where he talks about how this human body is like a dead body. The whole materialistic advancement of human civilization is like a decoration of a dead body. Everyone is a dead body, flapping only for a few days. And yet all the energy of human life is being wasted in the decoration of this dead body. Shukadev Goswami is pointing out the duty of a human being after showing the actual position of bewildered human activities. Persons who are devoid of the knowledge of Atma Tattva are misguided, but those who are devotees of the Lord have perfect realization of transcendental knowledge are not bewildered. So in our next slide, we're going to hearing about Krishna and his devotees, how it removes all fear. And Prabhupada writes very strongly how everyone wants to be free from all fear, and how people are actually fearful both in good times and in bad times. It's not like, when things are going well, we are not fearful. We are always fearful. This is the nature of material life. Of course, what to speak of disasters like famines, disease, natural disaster, revolutions or whatever. People are terrified. People are terrified even when there's lightning and thunderstorm. So what do we do to become free from fear? The answer is we must hear, glorify, and remember Krishna. So unless we hear and glorify, there's no remembrance. And why is this happening? How does this happen? That when we hear about Krishna, we get freedom from fear. It's because Krishna is the ultimate protector. And actually, Prabhupada says there's so much to hear about him. And because Krishna is full of opulences, there's no lacking in the amount we can hear about him, because he's the controller. And just like in the example he gives of Dhruva Maharaj, how he was, being a pure devotee, he was able to step on death and use it as a stepping stone rather than be afraid of death. I remember, hearing a class where Prabhupada talks about, how he gives the example of his Guru Maharaj, how somebody came to him and Guru Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Guru Maharaj, his Guru Maharaj was taking out a daily newspaper, a daily tabloid, I think, on spiritual matters, on Krishna. So that devotee, he asked his Guru Maharaj that, are you thinking that you will have enough material to take out a daily tabloid on Krishna. And then Bhaktisiddhanta explained that how, according to the Bhagavad Gita, this material creation is only 1/4 of Krishna's entire creation. And if in this 1/4 of material creation, there's so many universes, so many cities, and each city has a newspaper or periodical. In other words, there's so much news in one little city in this whole cosmos of millions of universes, millions of planets. Then you can imagine Krishna's creation, which is 3/4 of the creation, how much news there are. He said, I could give you, he said, second by second news, second by, even less than a second by second news. So this is what they're doing in the spiritual world. And Prabhupada explained so nicely, so wonderfully, that over there in the spiritual world, everybody's asking about news about Krishna every minute of the day. Mother Yashoda, as soon as Krishna leaves for the forest, every minute she's sending somebody off to see what Krishna is doing now in the forest. And then the next minute, what is he doing now? And similarly, all the Brajvasis are only concerned about this. So, of course, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj, he continued, he lamented that how there were no customers because people don't have that attraction here. There's not too many customers. Nobody is interested in knowing about who we actually are. So now next slide, the sages absorb their minds on Krishna. And Shukadeva Goswami gives his own story. At the end of Dwapar Yuga, I studied this great supplement of Vedic literature called Srimad Bhagavatam, which is equal to all the Vedas from my father, Shri Dwaipayana Vyasadeva. O saintly king, I was certainly situated perfectly in transcendence, yet I was still attracted by the delineation of the pastimes of the Lord, who is described by enlightened verses. That very Srimad Bhagavatam I shall recite before you, because you are the most sincere devotee of Krishna. One who gives full attention to and respect to hearing Srimad Bhagavatam achieves unflinching faith in the Supreme Lord, the giver of salvation. So here Shukadeva Goswami is saying, I myself studied this great literature from my father. Now Shukadeva Goswami was already a liberated soul. He was a Brahmavadi, which means he had given up all types of material desires. He did not relate with the material world. And that's why when we saw him, I mean, he was not even wearing clothes. He was naked. He did not identify with matter at all. Now, why did such a person undergo the trouble of studying Srimad Bhagavatam, a new literature? He was already well versed in all the Vedas. He was self-satisfied. He didn't need anything. It's because when one studies Srimad Bhagavatam, one hears about the wonderful qualities of Hari. And this gives so much pleasure that pleasure compared to other pleasures, even the pleasure of Brahman, that is just like a drop in the ocean of bliss, right? So, and when a soul hears this Srimad Bhagavatam, then he becomes surcharged with spiritual energy. When a person on a neophyte level, on our level, when he hears Srimad Bhagavatam, we get purified in our hearts, right? But when a person like Shukadeva Goswami, when he hears Srimad Bhagavatam, he becomes surcharged with spiritual energy. And that's why Shukadeva Goswami, when he heard the Bhagavatam, it had such a profound effect on him that he became the speaker of Srimad Bhagavatam. And in this verse, in the purport, Prabhupada explains that he emphasizes the point that how we must hear from a pure devotee. To study spiritual matters, we do need a teacher. We do need a teacher. We are hearing from Srila Prabhupada, a pure devotee. But we also need the association of live devotees. We also need to surrender to a live spiritual master. So why? Because there's two types of Bhagavatam: the person Bhagavatam and the book Bhagavatam. We need both. And in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a story of one Brahmana. This is a very
Yes.
good this is a very good lesson for us to understand. Through this story, we understand that unless we hear from the right source, the effect of reading will not be there. There's a story about this one Brahmana who who's, who told Sarup Damodar that how he's realized that Jagannath is Krishna, but he cannot move. That Krishna cannot move. And so he's wooden Krishna, and Lord Chaitanya is the moving Krishna. And Sarup Damodar, he actually chastised him very heavily. He said, "This is not Siddhanta. The Shastri conclusion is that the deity and Krishna is the same. Deity is non-different from Krishna." And so the Sarup Damodar, he did not approve of him and did not allow him to meet Lord Chaitanya. Sarup Damodar would screen the people before people went to meet Lord Chaitanya. And if he found that they were deviating in any way, he banned them. And he told him that you need to hear Srimad Bhagavatam from a pure devotee. Otherwise, you're not going to understand. You will just write nonsense. And that's why we see so much nonsense literatures, is because one has to be connected to the parampara. So in the next slide, and one time actually there's another story of how Prabhupada, he was supposed to meet a very big politician called Tilak. Lokmanya Tilak, I think he was called. And Prabhupada refused to meet him. And he wrote to him actually, and he said that um, that he doesn't understand. He doesn't understand spiritual matters. He's just only a big politician. That only a devotee can understand spiritual matters. In other words, both the speaker and the hearer, they need to be qualified. I was just thinking about some wonderful, very, very nice devotee who just passed away. This actually a few days ago. And his name was Narayan Prasad Rao. Right, he was the father of a very nice devotee in Pune. And he was doing this Bhakti Shastri course. And they had just finished Bhagavad Gita, and the time came for the exam, and he got sick with COVID, you know. And so he was rushed to the hospital, and he was so determined, he gave his entire exams from the hospital bed while, suffering in this condition. And he didn't leave his enthusiasm. He was also supposed to memorize the shlokas. He knew all the 27 shlokas of the Bhagavad Gita perfectly. And the teacher who corrected the exams said his answers were just amazing, perfect. And he passed away. After that. And his mind was completely immersed in the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita at the time of his passing. And his son-in-law was also chanting in his ears. So you can imagine the potency of Srila Prabhupada's books. He was, I think, over 70 years old. And what a glorious passing. Hearing just finished Bhagavad Gita exam, so determined, he died like a hero, isn't it? He died like a hero. So anyway, so we can, from these stories, some very, some very amazing devotees have passed away, unfortunately, in this time. And we hear the glorious nature of their passing. Why? Because in some way or the other, he was connected to Srila Prabhupada and his books. So in our next slide, Shukdev Goswami gives the verdict. Chanting the holy name is good for all types of people. And that's text 11. O king, constant chanting of the holy name of the Lord after the ways of the great authorities is a doubtless and fearless way of success for all, including those who are free from all material desires, those who are desirous of all material enjoyment, and also those who are self-satisfied by dint of transcendental knowledge. So these four types of people are the karmis, who are full of material desires, the jnanis, who want to become God, yogis who want mystic siddhis, and bhaktas who want to serve Lord, to achieve pure love of God. And in order to do that, in order to achieve pure love of God, Prabhupada explains in the purport how one must avoid the 10 offenses. Very sweet and famous verse, this verse, by the way, and very powerful purport. So in our next slide, we're going to talk about, Shukadev Goswami is going to talk about and explain that the story of King Khatwanga. And the reason why he's going to give this example of King Khatwanga is because he wants to encourage Parikshit Maharaj that it's okay, you have enough time. Look at this person, this great King Khatwanga, who only had a moment to live, and yet he went back to Godhead. And King Parikshit, you have 7 days to live. So in this text 12, he says, what is the value of a prolonged life which is wasted, inexperienced by years in this world? Better a moment of full consciousness, because that one gives one a start in searching after his supreme interest. The saintly King Khatwanga, after being informed that the duration of his life would be only a moment more, at once freed himself from all material activities and took shelter of the supreme safety, the personality of Godhead. Maharaj Parikshit, now your duration of life is limited to 7 more days. So during this time, you can perform all those rituals which are needed for the best purpose of your next life. So he's encouraging Parikshit Maharaj, saying you're not unfortunate, you're actually very fortunate. And here, Prabhupada gives the example of King Khatwanga, very wonderful story that I will just tell you in brief how Prabhupada explains that actually the demigods called him to the heavenly planets to fight with the demons who were harassing them very severely. And Maharaj Khatwanga, he actually fought the demons very valiantly for many, many years. And he actually, after they were all defeated, the demigods were very pleased with him. And they said, we are so pleased with you. Now, please ask for a benediction, because we can give you a benediction. So we have, so he asked for a benediction. But Maharaj, they asked for Maharaj Khatwanga to ask for a benediction. Maharaj Khatwanga, he said he was not interested in any material benedictions. What he was interested is to know when he's going to die. In other words, he was more interested in preparing for that ultimate time. And this is the nature, you can see, of advanced devotees. They, even though they may have so many duties in their life, material duties, but they never ever forget their prime duty in life. And the prime duty is serving the Lord, is our duties towards Krishna and our spiritual life. They never forget that. So Maharaj Khatwanga was a great example of that. He was alert to his prime duty. And he inquired about this from the demigods, about the remaining duration of life. He was not anxious to see, okay, what is, how much material assets he could get, or what his children are going to do, or how they can be made more secure. No, he was concerned as to what is his ultimate destination. So in this way, Maharaj Parikshit got very encouraged by Shukadev Goswami. So in our next slide, Shukadev Goswami describes the gradual process of achieving love of Godhead. And this is where we begin the description of the universal form of the Lord. And here, Shukadev Goswami describes the gradual process. And there's very nice verses here where he describes how one should leave home. The first step is detachment and practice self-control, and go to a sacred place and sit down in a lonely place. After sitting in the above manner, make the mind remember the 3 transcendental letters AUM, Om, and by regulating the breathing process, control the mind so as not to forget the transcendental sound. And in this way, the mind becomes progressively spiritualized. Withdraw it from sense activities, and by intelligence, the senses will be controlled. The senses, the mind too absorbed in material activities can be engaged in the service of the personality of Godhead and become fixed in full transcendental consciousness. Thereafter, Shukadev Goswami is telling Parikshit Maharaj, you should meditate upon the limbs of Vishnu one after another without being deviated from the conception of the whole body. Thus, the mind becomes free from all sense objects. There should be no other thing to be thought upon. Because the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, is the ultimate truth, the mind becomes completely reconciled in Him only. Now, these instructions that Shukadev Goswami is giving to Parikshit Maharaj, these are not the ultimate instructions that he's going to give. But the ultimate instructions are within these instructions. Because the ultimate instruction is to develop pure love of God. So one can take a step-by-step path towards developing love of God. And depending on our realization, Shukadev Goswami is going to start with a point of how a materialist is going to understand. So this is for the benefit of the materialist and also for the impersonalist. Because the materialist has to begin with the understanding that the world is not meant for our pleasure. When you think about it, our conditioning, the reason why we are here is because we see everything meant for our pleasure. How we can exploit everything for our benefit. Whatever if you actually analyze, when we walk down the street, we see something wonderful in a shop. We think how we can get it, or if it can be used in our benefit. So in order to change his consciousness of seeing the world as an object of his own sense enjoyment, this is being introduced, where he can see the material world in a devotional way as Krishna's energy, in relationship with Krishna. And then when this materialist starts to see everything in relationship with Krishna, he's not called a materialist anymore. So it's actually, Shukadev Goswami is giving a process by which to change the heart of the materialist. And it begins with a detachment. For that, detachment is required. In other words, one would have to give up one's hold in a physical way. But actually, how much can we give up physically? How much can we hold, rather, the material world physically? But within our mind, we can really hold, right? We can really hold this material world physically. And this is what we are doing. Within our mind, we want to grasp everything, because physically we can have only so much. Therefore, the process of mental detachment is required. And that's why Shukadev Goswami is talking about detachment, because that process of detachment is needed if you want to progress in spiritual life. And that's why he's saying that such a person should leave home and practice self-control. And he should live in a lonely place. He should bathe regularly, sit in a lonely place. And especially this is important at the time of death. So this is for the yogis who want to plan when they want to die, right? And therefore, for this, training is required from the beginning of one's life, Prabhupada writes. And then, of course, he gives the details of the process in this section of the Bhagavatam. And for that also, the chanting of Omkar is also recommended. Omkar, Prabhupada explains very nicely, is the seed mantra of transcendental vibration. So you can see that even for this, in the mechanical system of yoga, of this Ashtanga yoga, the transcendental sound vibration is important, isn't it? This control of the mind is so important. And for that, transcendental sound vibration is important. In other words, one really cannot control the mind unless one hears transcendental sound vibration. Even though it appears mechanical in terms of, controlling the mind, in terms of breathing, first of all, breathing exercises, right? And then the control, the chanting of the Om mantra, right? And the withdrawing the mind from the sense objects, the pratihara, right? All these processes, pranayam, pratihara, all these processes are there. But the ultimate point is that the mind has to be controlled. And that's whether they chant Om or whether they chant the holy name, the Maha Mantra. So even the yogis have to depend on Krishna's sound vibration. And Omkara contains everything, the Maha Mantra as well, right? So it is for people who are not able to chant Krishna's holy name, to understand Krishna's pastime, or to understand Krishna as a person. For such people, the chanting of Om is suggested. But for devotees, we naturally chant the Hare Krishna mantra. And in this way, the materialist whose mind is very much absorbed in material activities, he can engage himself in, the sound vibration of Omkar and control the mind. So here, Shukadev Goswami is not explaining the direct method. The materialist, he's explaining, is like a pantheist. What is a pantheist, by the way? He sees the world as a world of matter. Therefore, he believes only in what he sees. So the idea is to train this pantheist who just believes in what he sees, which is a world of matter, and to connect it to Krishna. So he's being trained to see everything in material nature as a part of God. He's not trained to see it as God, but as part of God. And in this way, he's supposed to meditate on the limbs of Vishnu. And that's what Shukadev Goswami is saying, that he meditates on the different limbs of Vishnu. And this is the first step in God realization. So what has happened? He's separated from his family members. He knows that he's going to die now. And so he now meditates on the limbs of Vishnu. So so here, what Prabhupada is doing in these verses, he's taking what Shukadeva Goswami is doing, he's explaining what that means, and then he explains the practical application of these principles. So nicely. So he explains the Ashtanga Yoga process, and then he explains the practical application of these principles. In other words, he explains that instead of leaving family and controlling our eating and our sleeping and performing the asanas, all the different asanas, and pulling the mind from the sense objects and vibrating Om, better to go to the temple and see the deity. And ultimately, to see the form of the Lord is the goal of the yoga process. That's what the yogis are trying to do, because that will lead us into our next chapter, the Lord within the heart. Now, in our next slide, Shukadev Goswami explains the details of the process. In other words, the meditation on the universal form of the Lord. Because Parikshit Maharaj has just asked him the details of the process. In other words, he's asked him how to fix the mind on the impersonal Virat Rupa. He's not asking, obviously, for himself, but rather he's asking for others. How they can, because he understands it's not so easy to fix the mind under the different limbs of Krishna. And that is necessary. Whether we're doing the Vedi process or the Raganuga process, focusing on the mind on the form of Krishna is necessary for any successful result. It is purifying, it removes the dirty things within the heart, and for advanced devotees, it gives them bliss. It gives them pure love of God. So now, in this very section, Shukadev Goswami explains the details of the process of this, meditation, and by meditating on the different limbs of Krishna, and as we can see there, he will explain how the material body, this material world, is the body of Krishna. The patal is the bottom of the feet, the heels and toes, the rasatal planets, the ankles, the mahatal, shanks, the talatal, knees, the sutal planet, two thighs, vital and atal, the chest, the luminary planets, the neck, the mahar planets, the mouth, the janas planets, the forehead, the tapas planets, and the head is the satyalok planet. And there's a beautiful activity for children in the guidebook, which Rati will explain later. And these planets, actually, you can study them in the 5th canto. It goes into details about these 14 planetary systems, 7 above and 7 below. It's really interesting to see that. And the 5th canto is a wonderful opportunity for children to learn the Vedic science, of the structure of the universe. How we have the universe, and then we have the different 7 islands, the 7 dweepas. One of them is the Jambudvipa, and within the Jambudvipa is the Bharatvarsha and India, um, and and this earthly planet. So it's very, very interesting how we can really see this, how Mahavishnu is, breathing out these universes, and how into each universe there's Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, who actually makes things move, the soul of each universe, like that, and we can understand. So there's one Mahavishnu, and there's millions of Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. It's very interesting. And how this universe is then further divided into these 14 planetary systems and the 7 dweepas. And then we hear about the Jambudvipa, and then we hear about the earthly planet. So all this can be studied further as we go on. And this will be also repeated. The universal form will be again repeated in the 3rd canto. Again, I think it's in the 9th chapter, when Brahma creates. Now this universal description, this description of the universal form is not something that actually Shukadev Goswami is making up just from his imagination. He actually, in the next chapter, he's going to talk about how it's authoritative. Why? Because Lord Brahma, he actually meditated on this universal form in order to create. He was ordered by the Lord to create living entities. And so he had to meditate on the Virata Rupa. Otherwise, he was clueless how to do it. So it's a very, very something that's coming from Parampara. Now, in our next slide, the demigods' place in how they belong in Krishna's universal body. And as the slide shows, all these different parts of Krishna's body are different demigods. His arms are Indra, and some other demigods. Nostrils, Ashwini Kumars. His palate is Varuna. His jaws of teeth are Yamaraj. The art of affection is his teeth. His smile, the illusory energy. Brahma has genitals. The ocean is his waist. Hills and mountains are his bones. Rivers are his veins. Trees are the hairs of his body. Clouds and hairs on his body. The clouds are the hairs on his body. His mind is the moon. Horse, mule, camel, and elephant are his nails. Birds are his artistic sense. In the next slide, Shukadev Goswami is going to explain how all classes of men are within the body of Virat Purusha. And these are the 4 classes: Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishya, and Shudras. You're very well familiar. But children have a great time to understand how, Krishna's, the Brahmanas are his face, the Kshatriyas his arms, the Vaishyas his thighs, the Shudras his legs, the demigods also his parts and parcels. And therefore, Prabhupada explains how the demigods, there's no need to worship demigods separately. And how all these 4 classes should work together to worship the Lord, to please the Lord, to offer sacrifice to the Lord. And the sacrifice for this age is the congregational chanting of the holy name of the Lord. And all these 4 classes should work together to perform the congregational chanting of the holy name. Okay, so my presentation I just completed, and I'll give it over to Rati Prishta to explain this chapter from the guidebook. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions on this chapter, please hold on till she finishes her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mataji. I'll just start sharing the slide. Yeah. So we begin with this. The story begins with first step in God realization. Story summary begins like this. Sukdev Goswami had come to meet King Parikshit, who was about to meet his death within 7 days. The king approached Sukdev Goswami respectfully and asked him a very important question. What is the best thing in life that each person should do? And especially, what is the best thing a dying person should do? So again, we can see that it follows such a interactive way of dealing, and the story goes on in a very interactive and dialogic manner, so that children can relate to the story nicely. Then we have key messages, wherein it gives us a reference guide to all the verses that are there in the chapter. And then we have in most of the chapters, we also have character descriptions, um, giving the highlights of important characters so that children can actually get to know more about them. And then there are these comprehension based questions, understanding the story, which are all multiple choice. So children take a lot of fun in answering and, getting the main essence of the story through these questions. And then we have higher order thinking questions, which probes children, which help them to go deeper into the story, understand the essence of the story, and go into philosophy as well. So we normally I write these questions in the side of the book, and then we have more discussions when we are reading the verses with children. Then comes activities. So this is a very interesting activity which Mataji was just saying that I would share. There are, it is a universal form pointing game. So the resource gives us various, cards kind of thing. So I actually cut them into various cards, and we made a box, and children put all those cards into this box, and then they are divided into two teams. One a child from one team will pick up the card, and he will enact the body part which is written on the card. So like for example, nails, and then other team have to guess what this body part represent in the universal form of the Lord. So this is a very interesting way to help children understand that how everything in this material world is actually, a part of universal form. So this is a very fun way to do that. And then we have analogy activities. So, like first analogy that is given here is of Mother Ganga with Krishna Katha. As Mother Ganga purifies wherever it goes, similarly Krishna Katha also purifies everybody. And then there is this nice fact-finding mission wherein children can, actually research about Mother Ganga. And then there is another interesting activity wherein children have to make a poster about on material existence. This is a poster which is made by a 6-year-old girl. May not be very perfect, but she has tried to depict, and her explanation was very wonderful wherein she explains that how this we are all part of this material ocean. So people are actually even on the shore. She has shown these three people, meaning they are enjoying the material ocean, but they do not know that next time that this wave of time will come, and they will also be dissipated by this wave in form of bubbles, and then they will have to come again in another wave in another body meaning. So she has tried to explain this through her poster. So this is how this interesting analogy can be done with children. And then we have universal research, wherein children are encouraged to look in Bhagavad Gita also, chapter 11, which describes greatly about universal form, and then research about it. And there is another activity of 10 offenses action plan, wherein children are encouraged to go deep into, what are the kind of offenses that we can make while chanting, and how can we avoid them. So this is another very interesting introspective activity, wherein critical thinking children can actually think about, the kind of offenses and how can they avoid them. And then comes some introspective activities, very interesting, bringing about the reflection in children's and their creativity. So first activity is to perceive the Lord around us. So herein children have to write a diary entry addressing their own deities. So it becomes very personal when children, they are telling how they were reminded of the Lord throughout the day through His universal form. So my daughter has written this small. This was a long, so meaning it was around 2 pages. I have cut one small paragraph just to show. So she's writing, "Dear Gopal." This is her Gopal, and she's addressing the dear Gopal. When I drink juice, then I remember your tongue. When I see the sun or moon, I remember your eyelids. And when I see out the space, just then I remember your navel. Just like your navel, the space is so deep. So she's then she compares it to clouds and hairs and all other parts of universal form. And this is another interesting here, today, and tomorrow activity, wherein a child, meaning the children can actually, one devotee has actually made it. The left portion, if you can see, she has made a devotee picture, and right portion she has made try to describe a materialist point of view. So what are various things which a devotee would hear and other things which a materialist would hear, and what would be the result of it? So she has tried to make a mental map of it through drawings and depictions. So devotee would definitely, playing kartal, kirtan, offering bhoga, tulsi aarti, chanting. So all these sounds he is hearing, and the result of it will be self-control, satisfaction, happiness, peace of mind, goodness, God consciousness. So very interestingly, she has described how a materialist is hearing songs of radio, television, pop music, shouting and fighting with each other, party dances, and what is the result of all those in a person's life. So very interesting way to help children understand all these things. Then cutting off material attachment, here again very interesting activity. A stick man has been drawn, and child is supposed to think about all different thoughts which a person may have at the time of death, and then he has to cut one by one which cannot be taken, which the things which cannot be taken with them at the time of death. So only chanting remains, and all other things she has cut. So this is another interesting way to help children understand that it is the spiritual realization which will actually go with us rather than any material aspects. And then target for the week, hear, chant, and glorify. So again, children can work in pairs or in small teams and help each other to understand the importance of hearing, chanting, and glorifying Krishna. Another very interesting activity wherein they have to create a profile of different kinds of people. One who is free from material desire, one who is full of material desire, and one who is self-satisfied. So we go on with some writing activities now. So they have to prepare a report on King Khatwang, and then they have to write a narrative on how actually they feel, when they get to know that they have only a moment left to live, as they have to imagine themselves as they are King Khatwang. So this very nice poem, sort of meaning a narrative in form of poetry, has been written by one 10-year-old girl. She is writing, "Oh, just a moment to live. Let me give up all material desire and concentrate my mind on Lord's lotus feet. Oh, my Lord Krishna, please forgive me of all my mistakes and kindly accept me as your servant. You are the Lord of my life." So this small narrative written by a 10-year-old girl. Then spelling errors is a very interesting way to help children understand, the grammatical portions also through Bhagavatam. So one word in this sentence, in every sentence, one word is wrong, which they have to correct, and then get the words right. Again, here they have to unscramble one of the word, and then the word before the dash, and then they have to write the proper way. So next is a sequencing activity wherein the story of King Khatwang is narrated in terms of sentences, and then they have to arrange them in a proper sequence. A very interesting activity again, which helps children to focus and understand the sequence. And then another way of understanding the aspects of Grihast or Grahamedi, there are various aspects which are given, and children have to identify whether it refers to a Grihast family or a Grihamedi. Like, for example, lives only for the benefit of his family, offers food to Lord and eat only prasadam. So they will write whether it is a characteristic of a Grihast or a Grihamedi. And then another very interesting activity, that what words fit the clues. So clues are given and they have to match them with appropriate words which are given there in the boxes. And then punctuation practice, a lot of grammatical practice has been given in this chapter to children, a lot of writing activities which will help children to understand. A lot of language, linguistic aspects are also being taken care of through Srimad Bhagavatam, a very interesting way. So here a punctuation practice is given wherein children have to mark the punctuations, and they have to, then the answer is also given towards the end so that they can check off where they have made mistakes. And then keywords, now here not just that they have to write the keywords and the sentence define, but they also have to identify the part of speech and then write the synonym and antonym for it. And then there is this activity of what do you think, wherein children have to identify whether this sentence is true or false as per their understanding. And then very nice devotional bucket list. So here, their child has to identify some items which he wants to do, and then he has to explain that how those items or those things can be dovetailed in Krishna consciousness. So my daughter has written these three: travel in submarine. So she is really excited to do that. So she says that I will travel with devotees and I will draw Krishna's pastimes when I do that. And then fly on a magical carpet. Somehow her imagination comes and she says that I want to fly on a magical carpet, wherein she says that I will fly to visit all Krishna's temple across the world, and to eat rasagullas. I will offer it to Krishna and then eat the rasagulla. So again, a very interesting way to help children understand that we are not we are not, if we are not on such exalted position that we can do everything for we are doing everything for Krishna. So then even if we have some desires, how can we dovetail those desires in a Krishna conscious manner and go ahead to proceed and become more Krishna conscious with what we are doing. And then there is a nice imaginatory activity wherein children have to write a letter of thanks, of gratitude towards their spiritual master, imagining that they are Maharaj Parikshit and they have to write a letter to Sukdev Goswami saying that how grateful they have been by when Sukdev Goswami has appeared on a right time and given appropriate instructions. And then comes answer to understanding story and spelling errors. So all the answers have also been provided, even the sequencing and this Graha Medi Grahas activity. And then punctuation answers are also there. And then these keywords, definitions, synonyms, and antonyms, and true or false. So that's it. The books are available. The Golden Age Media in India and Amazon in US. So we can access to them. And now I know we are little over time because of some disturbance in the initial this thing, but we still have 10-15 minutes for questions. So we would really we would really welcome now 2 questions. Anybody who has questions can raise their hand so that we can unmute them and have enlightenment from Mataji. Thank you all very much. So the session is open for questions now. Yes, Jyoti Mataji. Yes, Mataji.
Thank you, Mataji, for wonderful class. Mataji, in this Virat Rupa, Lord Brahma, he is he represents the genitals. So we know that Brahma is very intelligent and elevated. So actually, it was difficult for me to understand this.
Yeah. Okay. So the reason why Brahma represents Krishna's genitals is because that's the source of creation, right? So and Brahma is given the task of creation. You see, so the creative potency of Krishna is given to Brahma for the purpose of creation. Okay, so that's why he's representing the genitals of Krishna, is because he's meant to create the universe. I mean, the living entities. He's meant to populate the universe with living entities. So that's why he's representing this part of Krishna's body. Okay, so Krishna has many potencies, right? So we and each of these potencies represent a certain mode, right? The mode of goodness, which is the mode of maintaining, and then the mode of passion, which is creation, and the mode of ignorance, which is destruction, right? So so we can either take that potency and use it properly in Krishna's service, which Brahma is doing. He's following the order of the Lord, and he's doing. This is his devotional activity, his offering to the Lord. Right? It's a very big task that he's doing, and he's using it in the proper way. In other words, he's using the mode of passion in the proper manner in creating different living entities. And when we misuse it, then it comes out in bad ways. Okay.
Mataji, one more question.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, please continue, Mataji.
No, I've finished. Please continue.
Mataji, here the different demigods, they are given the different different parts of the Virat Rupa. And again, Brahmanas, Vaishyas, Kshatriyas, like that, they are also given. So, is it for, we know that Virat Rupa is imaginary form. So is it for just imagining these things?
Yeah, it is. So anything coming from Krishna ultimately is divyam. It's spiritual, but it's a material manifestation of Krishna. In other words, it's not a permanent feature. It's only manifested within this universe, but it's not an incarnation of the Lord as such. Like this is not a permanent form of the Lord. Okay. So and this is a very temporary form, which is meant for the benefit of those people who have a hard time understanding Krishna in his beautiful form, in his Shyam Sundar form. So they're given this ability because they have no access to the spiritual form of Krishna. Due to their conditioning, they cannot access the spiritual form of the Lord. So they are given, they are asked to meditate on this material aspect of Krishna. Okay. But in technically, in a higher sense, nothing is material, because if this very material world is utilized in the service of Krishna, it becomes spiritual. So this world is not material if you use it in the service of Krishna. Just like Prabhupada said that how this microphone that he's using is spiritual. Why? Because he's using it in the service of Krishna. And that's why, starting from the time of Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, until that time, you will see the acharyas, they were very, very renounced. This aspect of renunciation that Shukadev Goswami talks about in this chapter as being a necessary prerequisite to doing yoga, Ashtanga yoga, was meant for those renunciates, who are completely renounced. And we see that in the mood of the acharyas until Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, and then starting Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj, the concept of Yukta Vairagya was more pronounced. In other words, using the material world for the pleasure of Krishna, right? So how Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj, he started that by using the material, the cars. He would use, ride in the cars and use material facilities for the sake of preaching. And Prabhupada took the next step of crossing the ocean and actually coming to the West and giving us, you see. So in this way, matter is no longer material anymore, see. So it's really mainly for the benefit of the materialist, the pantheist, who's not able to go beyond matter.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Ankur ji has a question now.
Yes, please go ahead.
You can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me, Mataji?
Yes.
Yes, Hare Krishna. Mataji, I had this question, one question Jyoti Mataji asked. It is related to the, Virat Rupa. So sometimes in some cases it is like suggested that it is for the yogis, so that they can meditate upon. In certain cases, we hear that like to Arjuna, Krishna actually showed a Virat Rupa. So that was a, real one. So can you please elaborate a little more on this?
Yes.
To have a better understanding of this?
So in the case of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna shows Arjuna this Virat Rupa not for Arjuna's benefit, but for the benefit to really defeat and to, to give to make the impersonalists, the Mayavadis, and the atheists understand that the concept of God, to defeat their philosophy. Because ultimately the Mayavadis believe that, Krishna there's no personal God and everything is false in the material world, and how they are one with Brahman. So they want to merge into the Lord. In other words, they deny the personality of the Lord. And this way they're doing a great offense. So in order to defeat that philosophy, Krishna shows the material universe, saying that how when we understand Krishna, everything as being part of Krishna's body, then they can personalize. They can see everything, as not as belonging to Krishna's personal form. In other words, ultimately, Krishna is a person, and we can imagine this whole world as Krishna's body, like that.
Okay, yes, Mataji.
Next is Geeta. Can we have Geeta Mataji? You wanted to ask something else, Prabhuji?
Yeah. I was just like, and so that was the realistic one which was showed. And what is mentioned here in Bhagavad in this chapter? So this is imaginary, right? It is for the facilitation of to facilitate dhyan for the yogis. Is it so?
No, yeah, both of them in a way were they are not permanent. Both are the same. I don't think there was any distinction between that one and this one. What the devotees are, what the yogis are, seeing in terms of the materialist, that was also meant for the same purpose for the materialist to understand, and it is still imaginary. It is still imaginary in the case of Bhagavad Gita as well as in the case of this one. In the sense that it's not permanent. Imaginary in the sense that it's not permanent. It's temporary.
Okay, thank you, Mataji.
Yes, Geeta Mataji, we can have your question now.
Yeah, thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna, Mataji. My question is about fifth verse in the first chapter. In that verse, you mentioned that the material miseries, we can be free from material miseries if we glorify Krishna. So my question is that the children are 8-year-old or 9-year-old, they don't have much understanding about material miseries because they haven't seen any miseries so far. So how do you explain this to them?
Well, they don't have that intense realization like as adults have. So you teach according to their level. You cannot really everybody understands Bhagavatam through their own personal level, through their own realization. And that's why Bhagavatam is so good for everybody. They come to the level by which they can, understand. They only understand to that level. And even for explaining to others, we can only explain according to what we understand, right? So same thing with the children. They have some concept, and you can point that out. Like, for example, they may fall down and they hurt themselves, right? So in this way, you connect it to the practical side where they can chant. When they get hurt, then they can actually think about Krishna and remember Krishna and call out to Krishna and ask Krishna for help. So they have some sense of misery, maybe not so much. Their understanding of what misery really is, but yet they can relate to some extent.
Okay.
So you teach according to their level of understanding. You see, this class is meant for our understanding, so that we as adults we understand what Shukdev Goswami is really trying to tell us here. But then we give it to our children according to their level of understanding. But at the same time, we give them, not that we make it too superficial, yet we try to always go deeper than what they can actually understand. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you much.
Yes.
Kamal Kalavati Mataji. One more question, Mataji.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranams.
Dandavat.
Thank you so much. It was a very beautiful session. And I really enjoyed it. The best part was the activities part. And I still have a doubt in that also. To Rati Mataji also I wanted to ask, like there were so many activities and she picked a few of them to practically apply on her own daughter. So I wanted to know what her experience was. How did her daughter feel doing so many activities? Was she happy, enthusiastic to do all of, I think more than 3 to 4 activities she did, right? So how did she feel, Mataji?
Mataji, she is always more than excited and she's so very happy. She will always tell me more. So the more I do, she would want more. So there is no limit to it. She is really enjoying these books, and she is meaning I take classes, Sunday classes also, but she goes far ahead and she would want to complete all the chapters beforehand. And she is doing very well with these books. She is really liking them. And there is no end to, meaning how many hours I may dedicate, she would always want to have more of it. So it's very enlightening feeling for me also, because I feel when she will grow more older, parents want their children to read and they do not read. But this is the time when she is wanting more of it, and maybe I sometimes say no, now we have to stop. So that is it.
I just want to point out that Rati is actually a PhD in child education. I don't know if any of you know that. She's very qualified. She's got a PhD in child education, and it's really remarkable, her background. And also, she's a teacher. She's right now the schools are closed, so she's doing it online. But she's teaching, I think, children from 11th grade.
Yes,
yeah. So very qualified, and now she's starting. She's enrolling many children in her yatra to studying Bhagavatam from these guidebooks. So I just want, and I think 3 people raised their hand, right, Rati?
Yes, Mataji. Archana Mataji has question. Kala Sundari.
Yeah, we can go on. Yeah, let's go on. It's okay. Next time we have to take care of the technical part and make sure,
Yes, Mataji.
Okay. Yeah.
Kalindi Sundari Mataji.
Yeah. So one after another, they can ask quickly. Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Mataji,
Krishna.
you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, Mata, please accept my humble obeisances. Mata, I have a question about the Maharaj Parikshit. Sorry, Mata, the question I have in the chapter 12, Birth of Emperor Parikshit. Could I ask from there? So, Mataji, my question is, Maharaj Parikshit, the glorifying with different, all big hero, and then the big personality, and then they told that there's a Kanishta Adhikari, Madhyama Adhikari, and Mahabhagavatam, and Parikshit Maharaj is compared to a Mahabhagavatam. So, yeah, obviously he is a Mahabhagavatam as a very high level devotee. But one question I have, that he was king also, right? So he had to judge who is who doing good, who not doing good. So he had to give punishment as a king who not doing good. So on that level, that means what? He is Mahabhagavat, and when he had to do his king duty, he become a Madhyama, something like this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's very close. In other words, a Mahabhagavat versus, when they have to come down, just like Prabhupada, he was a Mahabhagavat, but yet he had to see that, he had to see what is good and what is bad, and he had to make distinctions, right? And take the decisions in the practical aspect of running the institution. So it doesn't change that person's stature from a Mahabhagavat, and doesn't make him lower in any way. So ultimately, the preacher, who's preaching, he's the highest. He's the highest. So even though a Mahabhagavat is considered somebody who actually doesn't see the difference, any difference between one person to another person, right? They all see everyone as spirit souls. They cannot really distinguish that he's a devotee and he's not a devotee, right? Ultimately, that's the vision of a Mahabhagavat. So they have this vision. That's why they're able to, preach in this way. A Mahabhagavat can make an effect to thousands of people. That's the difference between a Mahabhagavat versus, a Madhyam, or a, Madhyam Adhikari. A Madhyam Adhikari, or even a bit lower, can affect a few people in their life. Like, one can be temple president and affect the lives of maybe 20 people or 30 people. But a Mahabhagavat, he is able to, make a difference in the lives of, thousands, hundreds, millions, people. So he, apparently, I mean, you can see in Prabhupada's life, how he affected, the lives of thousands of people, and so did Parikshit Maharaj. It doesn't change their stature. It just means that in order to do they are really very confidential servants of the Lord, and in order to do that, they can even do very unpleasant things. Yeah.
And another question, Mata, like about the chanting. Chanting time hearing is so important, but at the same time, should I, when I'm trying to observe in lotus feet of Krishna, but sometimes I can observe, sometimes I cannot observe. So just keep hearing is okay, Mata.
Yeah, just keep hearing. This mind is so difficult to control, so fickle, right? You think that, oh, what is the use? I did all my 16 rounds and I don't think I got any taste at all. But yet, we are doing we are the Namabhas stage, right? The middle stage, the clearing stage. And eventually, there's a few clouds in the sky, but ultimately it's going to clear and we're going to see the son of Krishna, you see? We're going to see the holy name, the Shuddhanam. So we have to keep working at it and not give up. Okay.
Thank you, Mata.
Mataji, Archana Mataji had raised the hand earlier.
Yes.
Oh, Hare Krishna, Mataji. Thank you so much for the wonderful session again. So actually, I just had a question for Rati Prastha Mataji about her daughter and everything. So where she is and how old she been homeschooling and all that. I just wanted to type it on the chat, but for some reason the chat is disabled for me since the beginning of the session.
Oh.
So.
Really? Okay.
So it is not. So that's why actually I didn't want to raise the hand, but we can even move this question to the next session if it's over time. So no problem.
I see. No, I think something. Yeah. Can you? Yeah. So, Rati Presh, I mean, you can go ahead and ask. It's okay. It's a little over time, but for those who are staying, I mean, for your benefit, it'll be nice, right?
I was just curious, how old her daughter is, and as she's been homeschooled and where she's located and all that. So,
Rati?
Mataji, she is 8-year-old and she goes to my own school. Meaning, right now she's not doing homeschooling. She goes to private school outside. Meaning, in the school where I teach, she is in the same school. So she's in class 4 right now, and she does her academic studies, and simultaneously we do Bhagavatam in the evening. Every day she studies. Reads.
Thank you, Mataji.
Okay.
That's it,
thank you all for being so patient with all our technical difficulties. We'll try to look into that matter and get it all together. And it's not and we will upload it on YouTube afterwards. Thank you. Hare Krishna, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.